Master Teague. Master Teague talked at great length about the long road that he had coming back from an Achilles injury, suffered roughly 7 months ago at the beginning of preseason practice. He is injured on the first day of spring practice. They're not even in pads or doing full contact that day, and he suffered an Achilles injury. And then you had the pandemic hit the next week, and he had to go through a lot of the rehab on his own, living by himself, and at times doing the exercises by himself, but got through it. And sounds like, according to him, he would have been ready to play if the season had begun on September the 5th or September the 3rd. He would have been able to play in one way or the other. Tony Alford was not quite as ebullient about that idea. Said that I'm not sure that he'd be ready to go 50 or 60 plays if we played a game today, but that's a test that he would have to kind of pass as they go along. And obviously, I'm sure they have not put him in a lot of heavy contact situations. So it could be a case where they get into the first game or two and see how he's able to handle the pushing and the pulling and the hitting and all that. But I took it all as a good sign that he's close to 100%, if not 100%. And Trey Sermon is also 100%. The Oklahoma transfer coming over had a knee injury late last season at Oklahoma, missed the end of their season last year. And this really didn't come up on the call, but man, you talk about Rat getting off the ship at the right time. Oklahoma is 1-2 and has no hope of competing for anything this year. It doesn't appear. And with the terrible defense and a freshman quarterback, they're going to be lucky to finish 7-4 or whatever it may end up. So, he's at least in a position to play for a championship his final year and help his draft stock. So I think those are probably the two big things that came out of it. Marcus Crowley, not quite ready to play, coming back, I think, from a knee injury from last year. Steele Chambers, a walk-on Xavier Johnson, also in the mix there at running back, true freshman Mayan Williams as well. But that was a lot of what I took out of the running back call. Again, with Teague, I want to see him be able to do it against the best teams. He kind of fell off at the end of last year. Penn State, I don't think he even had a carry in the Michigan game, and only 7 carries for 9 yards when he had to fill in for J.K. Dobbins in the Fiesta Bowl against Clemson. So I think that the jury is out on him. Can he do it against the better teams they're going to play?
Before we kick it to you, Tony, I think it's interesting that Steve brings up what Trey Sermon left behind. I was talking Oklahoma football as they prepare for Texas yesterday. The Sooners, prolific in the passing game, of course, but the running game has been just as good and supported that passing game. They're averaging 3.6 yards per carry this year against inferior foes without Trey Sermon, and that's not a way to support a freshman quarterback for as talented as he has been. Master Teague, the interesting thing about him, when I watched him run last year, I thought I was watching Raymond Harris. And then we looked at it in the offseason, and as Steve pointed out a number of times, in terms of straight line speed, it's supposed to be explosive. And that's what I'm really going to be looking out for, of whether my eyes were just deceiving me, or does Master Teague have that extra gear?
Well, Tony Alford has said he's the fastest running back. He said that last year with Dobbins on the team. And Kevin knows when Teague was looking for offers, he would get the hand time 4.3s at Alabama and Ohio State both at their camps. So there is speed. I think it's the process of getting to that second level and getting past the defensive line. What I've found interesting, and just you talked about what he worked on in the offseason, Teague, is his agility. And he said the injury was a blessing because it allowed him to sort of rebuild – I don't know, his tendons, this is just the way he ran and the way he worked. And he said he's worked on his agility. He's improved his agility, because I think we all saw there was a pretty big difference late in the season between JK and Teague in terms of avoiding tackles and what they did with the ball. And so this is a guy who is more agile and still incredibly strong. He's, let's say, like 5'11", 225. And really, really mature. I said on my podcast, when I grow up, I hope to be as mature as he is, because he said the toughest thing about all of this wasn't the injury. The being in limbo with the Big Ten was tougher than having to go through all of this rehab by himself for a while before he was allowed to utilize some OSU facilities. And just a really mature kid. And you're talking about Oklahoma and Trey Sermon. If Oklahoma would have used him more last year, he'd probably still be there. And this is a guy that didn't get a touch against Texas in the Red River Shootout last year. The touches were declining before there was any injury, and it was pretty much he had no spot there. They had no use for him, and now it's looking like maybe a bad decision on Oklahoma's part. As 2 months ago, it was looking like a bad decision on Sermon's part, and who knows? Maybe it'll work out for everybody. Does not appear that it has worked out for Oklahoma at this point.
Well, they thought they were going to have Kennedy Brooks, and then he opts out, and then the loss of Kennedy Brooks throws that position into disarray. And yeah, exactly on to Tony's point, just rewind a couple weeks ago, and you look at, the Big 12 is set to play. I mean, they're playing right from the get-go, and the Big 10 is in mothballs at that point. It's like, well, Trey Sermon gambled and lost there, but I think at the end of the day, he's going to have the last laugh in terms of being able to compete for a championship, because I'm not going to completely be able to handicap that Texas-Oklahoma game, other than to say both those teams are handicapped. They're not, neither of them are very good. And it's just, I think Trey Sermon's going to be able to have a pretty strong season with the Buckeyes as a 1-2 punch with Master Teague. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is just the amount that Xavier Johnson keeps getting talked about. And we do sometimes have things dangled at us, like, the diamond formation and this, that, and the other. Is this the year that it's like, oh, well, Xavier Johnson's going to be the guy. Oh, is Demario McCall going to be the guy or whatever? But, we're hearing his name, and it's not a case of us bringing it up. And it's not just a matter of Tony Alford saying it. You have Ryan Day saying it. You have fellow running backs saying it. So I think especially as Marcus Crowley is still a little bit on the mend at this point, and you got to figure somebody like Mayan Williams is still trying to figure out which way is up and which way is down, just, as any kid who came in over the summer is doing at this point. You could see him and Steel Chambers, battling for those third team carries.
And keep in mind about Xavier Johnson, he was a 3-star wide receiver out of high school with offers from like Iowa State and Bowling Green and places like that, but chose to walk on at Ohio State, and has played defensive back, has played receiver, running back, all sorts of different things, and was a starter on the special teams. So he's very involved in a lot of what they do. And I asked Tony Alford, who was the leader in the room of the running backs. He basically said it's Teague and Johnson who do most of the answering, and Sermon is coming on strong. But that room, as Kevin is saying, like, a lot of guys have injury history. So there's when people are talking about like Xavier Johnson, it might be just a good idea to keep him in the back of your mind when you got Sermon with injury history, Crowley injury history, Teague injury history, and now maybe he may be the 5th running back, but he could end up being like the 3rd or a 2nd at some point this season if things go haywire.
To your point, Steve, with Master Teague, let's see down the stretch. 2 carries, 7 yards. That's not much of a compilation there against Penn State, but 12 for 29 against Michigan at 2.5 per pop. Clemson, of course, 7 carries, 9 yards when J.K. left. And the vaunted Miami of Ohio defense as well held Master Teague to 11 carries and 34 yards. But yeah, the big boys down the stretch did a number on Teague in limited number of carries, 21 in those final 3 contests.
Yeah, I think again, we want to see more out of him. And, you hope that he's able to come back and he's 100% after the injury. But the other thing is, this is a run game that really complemented what Justin Fields did throwing the football. They had almost perfect balance. It wasn't entirely equal yardage-wise or whatever, but I just feel like that there was almost perfect balance for this team last year, and we still don't know how much Justin Fields is going to run the ball as well. He shouldn't have to with these talented running backs in there. Crowley to me is kind of a wild card if he can get healthy, and it doesn't sound like he'll be ready till the second half of this abbreviated season probably. And certainly Chambers has got some upside as well. So we'll see, exactly what they do with this. But, this means so much for Sermon. I mean, he's trying to position himself for an NFL career of some sort and trying to get past the injury bug on his own. And everybody said he's been a quality guy since he's arrived in June with the rest of the upperclassmen in mid-June. And seems like he's a guy that they're going to be counting on early and often to spell Master Teague. I don't know if they'll do this by series or if they'll substitute guys mid-series for a particular play set that they want to run, or how it'll go. If one has certain characteristics, you'd think Teague's more of the power back, but and Sermon could be more of a pass catcher, I don't know, or a third down guy perhaps. But I guess I'm interested to see how it all shakes out this fall.
When Justin Fields was compromised in the last 3 to 4 games of the season, it almost, especially, I have glimpses of that Clemson game in which there were stretches of time when they almost didn't look like the same offense. It looked, and I'm not just talking about the productivity without a healthy Fields and without JK, but in regards to the approach, they almost look like a drop back passing team in the second half of that game, where the effect on the running backs is not just the offensive line and obviously their ability, but when Justin Fields is a threat and when they're at that mesh point and the defense has to make that split-second decision coming off of Justin Fields' decision to whether keep the ball or give it to the back, that's sometimes when you see a lot of those big plays pop on the backside of that because the defense has to – there's that moment of uncertainty in trying to find the football.
And that's what they're looking to get back this year with, different styles of running backs. And I think they still need that threat from Fields, though, because we've seen what happens when you don't have that with Dwayne Haskins. And granted, this is a different offensive line, but I think you'll see enough of Fields who is now a vegan and faster. So he's going to want to show off those wheels, and keep it here and there. And who knows, you may only need to do it in the first game like you did last year. And then you open up with like the 52-yard run for a touchdown just to, keep people honest and let them know that I will keep it, even though he's not looking forward to getting hit. But when you can do what he can do, use it all correctly, I guess.